Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Integrative Wellness Radio. So I am here with Dr. Nick once again. So we have part 2 of our pain series. So today we're really kind of piggybacking off of everything we talked about in the previous episode, which really had to do more so with some emotional ties to some of the physical pain that we can deal with. And the primary reason we wanted to talk about this on our podcast in the first place is because as chiropractors, being our original doctorate degree, when we were practicing as chiropractors primarily and not doing more integrative medicine, we just found that, there were certain people that did really well with getting physical work done to their body. And then there was a huge portion of people that didn't necessarily see a difference. And I know that for us, we take a full body approach when we do that physical work. So we made sure that we were addressing muscles, ligaments, tendons, joints, etc. And we found that sometimes that wasn't the problem. And sometimes the problem was stemming from a different root cause. And part of that could have been different emotional things that they were either holding on to from their past, or it could even just be certain fears that were coming up about where they were going in their lives. So that was all in the last episode. So really in my zone of genius, one of the biggest things that I've learned over time is that a lot of pain can actually stem from different types of infections, toxicity, as well as even meridian problems. Mm-hmm. And that's really what we're going to elaborate a little bit further on, is just some of the things that we've seen with really, really common areas of pain. Because I think that, overall, when it comes to the low back, that is such a common complaint, is people dealing with low back pain. There's a lot of people complaining of knee pain, shoulder pain. Really, it's all over. But definitely when it comes to low back pain, when you look at the statistics, especially in the U.S., it's astronomical, the amount of people dealing with low back pain. And what I found to be really, really interesting is as I moved into being more of an integrative physician, is that a lot of people's low back pain was actually due to referred pain from their gut.
Mm-hmm. A lot of pain, honestly, is referred. And the interesting part is, like, when you talk to somebody just on the street, they're going to be, quote unquote, like a believer of something, or it just doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing is everything works. It's just
what's right for you.
Well, yeah, what's your problem? It's like, mm-hmm. I don't believe in acupuncture, or I don't believe in chiropractic, or this surgery didn't work. And it's mm-hmm. like, well, they all work, but if that wasn't your underlying problem, yeah, it's not going to help you. Mm-hmm. So it's just understanding of, you need what you have to figure out what's actually causing the symptom, mm-hmm. and then that needs to be worked on.
Well, I think my famous phrase is, it's not about what you do, it's about how you do it. And I love what you said about the acupuncture thing, because acupuncture, a lot of people actually don't even really know what acupuncture is doing. But there's a lot of people talking about acupuncture for fertility. They're talking about it for pain. They're talking about it for golfer's elbow, tennis elbow. There's all of these different claims of, what acupuncture is doing. But at the end of the day, acupuncture is putting needles into your meridians, which we'll talk about a little bit further, in order to remove energetic blockages in that meridian. So meridians are pretty much channels that are associated with organs. And don't get me wrong, it's more complex than that, but I want to keep it rather simple for people. But I think that Dr. Nick has a really, really amazing story about a woman who came in with migraines, which is obviously painful, that had a lot of different treatments. She went to neurologists. She worked with
she went to every specialist.
Yeah, different headache specialists, experts in migraines, etc. And I'll let you elaborate further, but her problem ended up not being anything that was on her radar or on the radar of any of the other physicians that she saw.
No, and interesting you bring this up, because we'll go for full circle, because just a client I saw yesterday, actually just for chiropractic, at the end he goes, I know this probably doesn't make any sense, but what do you think about this symptom? So that will be my finishing up to that. But if you want the whole story, you can, it's not up yet, but my TEDx talk in Chamonix, France, I also gave this example in there, and through the slides you can actually see the actual
pattern
that the symptoms were following. But yeah, like you said, she'd seen over a dozen specialists, neurologists, orthopedic physicians, just all over for having these really intense migraine headaches on the side of her head. And nobody could figure out what was happening because it ended up not being actually a head problem at all. Digging deep just in the evaluation, we found that she had some gastrointestinal problems that led to actually having some loose stools. As a physician, we know anytime somebody has loose stools, we're looking at the liver and the gallbladder. The gallbladder produces bile, which really helps to break down the fats and the proteins. But when that's not happening, our fats aren't broken down, they're just passed through the stool. And we all know fat floats, so it's a simple question for a physician to be like, if your stools float, we know there's probably a problem in the liver gallbladder, breaking that down. And through some of the other evaluations that we do, one of the technologies in our office actually evaluates the different meridians. And in doing so, it evaluated, showing that her gallbladder meridian was very stressed. And at that time, I actually didn't have tons of background on where this meridian was traveling through the body. So got on Google University and like, where's this gallbladder meridian go? And traveled it up. And I was like, oh, wow, this is freaking crazy. It literally comes up from the gallbladder, wraps around the shoulder, comes up over the head, and then crosses right back over the side of the head where she was having these headaches.
Pretty much, which is the temple.
Yep, right where she was having these headaches. And I showed it to her, and she's like, what? Just mind blown. And then we did a type of muscle testing called autonomic response testing, where you can go through and challenge different parts of the body, different meridians, different organ systems. The cool thing is you can actually challenge and see if they're connected together to the same problem or if they're completely different, separate. And we found that her gallbladder was connected to the headaches, and that was the meridian was definitely causing stress to there. Then we were able to challenge and really figure out exactly which supplements, which dietary recommendations, what was going to help her heal the meridian and the gallbladder. And a couple of weeks later, she never had a headache since, and this had been going on for years, and she was just like, this is insane.
Well, I think it's important for people to kind of understand, too, that all symptoms are connected. Because you mentioned the comment about, her bowel movements being a little bit off, which, as physicians, when we have somebody say that, we kind of know that it might be tied to something going on in the gut, the gallbladder, for instance.
And in the consult, she was like, really, why are we talking about this?
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting, too, because everything is connected. And, one of the other symptoms that I find that people report in their initial consultation when they have a gallbladder issue is they often say they're lactose intolerant. And they're not always lactose intolerant. They just don't do well with the fats that's in dairy, and that's why they're assuming they're lactose intolerant. So that's a really common thing. So if you're lactose intolerant and you're also dealing with, headaches or migraines, you might be dealing with a really similar issue, which is, they're connected, and your gallbladder is actually the root to your headaches that are on the side of your head in the temple area.
And finishing that story up yesterday, I got done doing chiropractic workup with the client, and he goes, you probably don't have an answer, it's really weird, but I've just been getting these weird sensations on the side of my head. He's like, it literally travels up and then just crosses right back over here. And I'm like, well, I know what this one is. So I literally got on, pulled up the gallbladder meridian, and before I could even say anything, that's the pattern! That's the pattern! I go, yeah, your gallbladder's not happy. And he goes, I went to my primary a couple of weeks ago, and they said, I don't think your gallbladder's doing so well. And he goes, and it's creating this? He's like, this is insane. So he didn't, at that time, want to actually get too deep with it, because it, quote-unquote, wasn't causing him enough pain to do something about it at that time. But I just hey, here's a simple thing, we'll see if it works. And I gave him Beta Food from Standard Process, which is a whole food supplement, and it's literally just really condensed, concentrated beet and beet leaf juice. So
beets are really, really good for the gallbladder.
So we'll see if that changes anything for him, but it was a cheap $17 hopeful fix.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is not everybody's necessarily wanting to dig a little bit deeper with their pain. But, this kind of brings me to another story in relation to the knees. And we have a therapy in our office called sound wave therapy, and we used sound wave.
A good learning experience.
Yeah, so we've used sound wave since we pretty much opened our business, and we've used it for a lot of physical issues. So if somebody comes in with, reporting that they have a lot of joint pain, or if they have a lot of scar tissue because they've had injuries or surgeries, etc., the sound wave is fantastic for that. It breaks down scar tissue, it modulates the healing process, and really helps people to reduce their pain very fast. Like usually right after the session, they're like, wow, my pain has significantly decreased.
And increased range of motion.
Yeah. So we had tons of success, and we still do, with the sound wave therapy. But specifically, this was before we were truly more of an integrative practice, and we had a patient who came in and we worked on his knee, like super excited that we were going to help him pretty much eradicate his knee pain. And when he came back, he pretty much said, "Do not touch me with that machine." And it was the first time we ever had that experience. We were like, whoa, what happened? And he's like, my knee blew up. I was in so much pain, I couldn't even move. And when we actually took it a step further and we started doing better testing, it actually turned out that this patient had strep in his knee. So those of you listening, yes, strep, like the strep in your throat. So people think that, I guess this is two parts. So first of all, we think that strep, as an example, can only be in your throat, which is completely false. You can have strep in your sinuses. You can have strep in your joints. You can have strep in your organs. You can have strep anywhere. And it primarily moves via your lymphatic system. So your lymph nodes are everywhere in the body, but they do move. And that is kind of...
Your lymph nodes don't move, but things travel through the lymph.
Yes. So what's going to happen is you can easily have things transport through those lymph vessels. So with that being said, you can easily have something that started in the throat but ended up going somewhere else.
And even like a stomach bug can move to the liver, to the pancreas, or even to the lymph down into the knees.
Because everything is connected.
100%,
is really what it comes down to. So with this being said, this was someone who was dealing with knee pain for a long time and was getting surgeries, was, scoping the knee out, cleaning up scar tissue, etc., and just kept hitting a roadblock. And it was not because it was a true knee problem. Don't get me wrong. The knee was damaged. There was inflammation. There was cartilage damage. But that was because the infection was wreaking havoc on the surrounding tissue. So what happened with the sound wave is the sound wave serves two purposes, essentially. So it can break down scar tissue and adhesions. So it can even break down adhesions in the lymph nodes if the lymph nodes are clogged with something. So again, the strep can clog up those lymph nodes. So you go in and you start to break that up, and the infection became mobile. And the infection came to the surface because of the technology, and that pretty much caused an immune response. And the immune system came to the scene to be like, oh crap, and try to clean it all up. And just for those of you that are kind of not understanding that connection, is an immune system response is an inflammatory response. So those of you that
think if you sprain your ankle,
it blows
up. There's more blood flow. It's tender. It's warm.
Exactly.
Like everything. Yep.
So if your immune system is attacking something, then it's going to also create that inflammatory response. And that's the same exact thing when we get sick, and especially say it's a sore throat, all of this hurts. And we find all these lymph nodes and the glands are swollen. And it's because of an immune system response. So this is super, super important for people that are dealing with something like rheumatoid arthritis or dealing with fibromyalgia, is these are classified as inflammatory conditions, and they're even classified as autoimmune conditions. So let's take a step back and think about this. So we have an inflammatory condition that is classified as an autoimmune condition. But they say, well, we don't know why the immune system starts to attack. We just, it's just a defective mechanism that happens. It could be genetics. It could just be that your immune system got confused. And we kind of just play a little dumb when it comes to autoimmune conditions. But if you go back to the exact same foundation of what we just said, is the immune system is in charge of attacking foreign substances. It's in charge of attacking bacteria, fungus, parasite, anything that the body is classifying as foreign. So if the immune system is attacking something and then that is inducing an inflammatory condition, doesn't it make sense that the autoimmune portion is just the immune system attacking an infection that is in tissue? So if we have rheumatoid arthritis, where does it start? It starts in the hands usually. And we get terrible hand pain. Our hands blow up. We can't get our rings on and off. We can't open things anymore. So one of the most common triggers to the small joints of the body is mold. And what's really interesting is that mold doesn't always necessarily come from your house or, a moldy basement or, water damage.
Food
Is one. So we get exposed to mold by drinking wine, drinking coffee, eating cheese.
Peanuts,
peanut butter.
Peanut allergies everywhere.
Exactly.
Is it a peanut allergy?
That's a side tangent that Nick wants to go on. But it's important for us to understand that we can be exposed to mold from food, and it's all the good stuff, right? The wine, the cheese, the peanut butter, the coffee. But then secondary to that, when we're talking about mold, is one of the questions that I ask in my consultations that people are not always understanding is I ask them if they've been allergic to penicillin. Actually, first I'll ask them, have you ever been exposed to mold? And everyone's like, no, absolutely not. No possible way. And I say, okay, are you allergic to penicillin, the antibiotic? And they go, oh, yeah. I've been allergic since I was like 2. I was like, okay. So penicillin is made from penicillium, which is mold. So that means that by 2 years old, they already had mold in their system. Is it from a house? Is it from, food? I don't know. But all I know is that mold is playing a role in their body. So mold is way more common as a toxin to our human body than people realize. And especially if you were to use Google University and you look up the symptoms of mold toxicity and the symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis, you will be baffled because they are almost the same.
And it's funny, maybe not funny, but more ironic, that we think mold is like this new concept of creating all these problems. And I don't even actually know. I might have told you this a long time ago. This is one of Dr. Nick's side tangents, so know where you're going with this. But way back in the day, actually, when Catholicism was starting, all the priests, the wands that they have, the water kind of pours out, that's called an aspergillum. And when you look at it, next to a picture of aspergillus, the mold fungi.
Aspergillus is a type of mold.
They look similar. So back in the day, priests were really healers. And the biggest thing they were dealing with is this toxicity
from aspergillus mold.
Yep. So this has been going on for years and years and years and years. And it's just ironic that people are always like, mold, like, why is this? It's like a new concept, but it's been going on for ages.
I think this is one of like the most eye-opening things to me because, you read about, especially for me, like diving into the research, like getting certified and understanding like mold toxicity and how it affects the human body. And personally, as a physician, it was a little overwhelming because when I started to do the right testing, I was like, holy crap, everybody has mold toxicity. So it was like, if everybody has mold toxicity, then why does everybody's symptoms look so different? Not everybody had rheumatoid arthritis, but, other people had brain fog. Other people had gut issues from it. So mold can manifest in
Skin issues.
Skin issues, yeah. It can manifest in many, many, many different ways. But with that being said, when you're dealing with... I totally forgot what I'm saying.
Mold. When you're dealing with...
It's good old dementia.
When you're dealing with a brain fog mold issue, you've blacked out hard.
Give me a second.
It's impressive.
It was gonna be good. Shut up. spark my memory. What was I just saying?
I don't know, but I'm going to finish the aspergillum. So the priest, they'd use the aspergillum, and when they wave it, water comes out, and it's part of like the cleansing kind of prayer, and they're cleansing the body of the aspergillus. So that's the symbolism of why they took that and created it. So they're still doing like the cleansing aspect of kind of detoxifying somebody's sins. But it was really just symbolism from back in the day where they were actually getting people. Wow. Yeah, pretty cool. That's kind of wild, actually. Yeah, if you Google aspergillum and aspergillus, there'll be like two pictures next to each other, which is pretty cool. Or like Catholic aspergillum and aspergillus. Still blanking out there, Helen.
So I was pretty much saying that the mold, doing the testing, it can
create pain.
No, affect a lot of different things. And when you test for it, it can become...
I don't know where you're going on that one.
Overwhelming. Son of a bitch.
Even the left side of the headphones tuned out.
I'm done with this. So we'll just start in a different direction. We'll splice it together.
Yeah, this whole part could be cut out.
Yeah.
Also, that shit you told me about is actually kind of wild. But I just kind of tried to find it. And I'm like, what the fuck?
It's cool, right?
That's weird.
I don't know. So I guess the really interesting part, too, is like when I started to learn more about mold and I started to do testing, it became a little bit overwhelming as a physician because I started to realize that, there was a lot of different people that were dealing with mold issues. It was actually pretty common, but it also was very eye-opening that not everybody necessarily had the rheumatoid arthritis. Not everybody had the same pain patterns. And the really fascinating thing about mold is that it is both water and fat soluble. So it can pretty much go into any tissue that it wants. It doesn't necessarily just go into those small joints of the hand, but it can also get into the gallbladder and cause more maybe of that pattern that goes over the head like we were describing earlier. It can even get into the spinal cord because, again, it can get into almost any tissue being water and fat soluble. So you could easily have tons and tons of back pain that nobody can necessarily figure out.
And then with mold being just crazy exacerbated with Wi-Fi and EMFs.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you said that because some people deal with this like phantom pain. And one of the questions that I ask in my consultation that people are usually looking at me like, why are you asking me this? Or they look at me and go, I can't believe you just said that because I've never said that out loud because I don't want people to think I'm crazy. And what I ask them is, do you sometimes have a buzzing or crawling sensation that you almost feel like your phone is on you vibrating and then you realize it's not your phone? And they're like, oh my gosh, yes, I do feel that sometimes. So one of the reasons why people are getting these weird phantom pains that feel almost vibratory or crawling is if they have mold in the system, maybe it's in their lymph nodes, maybe it's in joints, it varies on the person. But when they have something like an Apple Watch or a Fitbit, or they're constantly being bombarded with all of the Wi-Fi, or other types of Bluetooth wireless technologies, they've actually proven at this point that mold will multiply by 600% per week by being exposed to all the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi.
That's crazy.
So when people are talking to me and I see that they have their Apple Watch on or their Fitbit, I'll ask them, be like, when did your pain get really bad? Or when did you start having that weird phantom pain or vibrating pain? And a lot of times it lines up when they started wearing their device.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, for us to live in a bubble and think that we're going to escape Wi-Fi, it's not real life. But the least we can do is try to make our sleeping environments as Wi-Fi free as possible. So if you do have your phone in your room, put it on airplane mode. If you have a router in your bedroom, get it out.
Or turn it off while you're sleeping. You're not using it.
Exactly.
It's actually really cool. I think it's France. It was definitely the school systems in Europe.
That's what I was going to say.
But now, starting 2019, every single new school that they build, it's all landline because the science is out showing that Wi-Fi is literally detrimental to our learning, to our mind, to making us sick, more stress on our nervous system. So they're like, well, yeah, we're not going to put this in our school systems. This is detrimental to learning. It doesn't actually make any sense. But in the U.S., we have Wi-Fi routers in every single classroom.
And I get it. We want to be more, technologically advanced, and, the computers are the way of the future. So, everything is software, tech, etc. So I get both sides of it, but I think that we just need to be more conscious of our sleeping environment. And one of the things that I know that when I found it out, I was completely surprised, but cordless landline phones are actually worse than routers, and they're also worse than cell phones. But I'm glad you just said France, because I totally lost my train of thought before. And one of the things that I wanted to say about the mold situation is that mold became a little bit more evident to me when we were in France. And when we were in France, we actually had the news on in the background when we were in Paris. And I was really intrigued because one of the things that came up was a whole segment on the news channel about agritech. And they were talking about technology and agriculture and how they're using artificial intelligence and things like that. So if anybody's been to France, we all know the wine is fantastic there. It is the best. And it's it makes you feel very different. It doesn't give you a headache. It doesn't do any of those things. And I was very fascinated with, the wine just being so clean and just kind of like making you feel different when you drink it. So when I was watching this segment on the news, what they said is that they have these cameras, or drones, I should say, that are artificial intelligence based, that hover over the vineyards in France. And they actually take snapshots of the vines to monitor for fungus, which is mold. And if they find the littlest trace of fungus, they go in and rip out that vine so it doesn't spread. And that just became so evident to me that when we talk about mold being on our food, that it's not just this, oh, no big deal. Can it really be that bad? It's a real thing. And in other countries, they're being proactive on making sure that it's not spreading. Like, fungus is a disease. And if we're not taking those precautions on our produce, on our wheat, on the rice, on the wine, on the coffee beans, like, we could easily be eating these foods that are like massively toxic, and we're just not even aware of it.
And then, like, transferring that back to pain, it's like all that does is
make you inflamed.
Make our lymph nodes inflamed, and our lymph, when that's not moving and stagnant, inflammation occurs, and if that's by a joint or anywhere else, we're experiencing pain.
And I know we talked a little bit about fibromyalgia in the previous episode and talking about, like, people not being truly happy with themselves from an emotional standpoint can be part of the puzzle when it comes to fibromyalgia. But at the end of the day, like, fibromyalgia, obviously when you do the testing, it could be complex. But what it comes down to is that there is so much neurological stress on the body that is causing your nerves to be super close to threshold. And what that means is, like, you have the slightest stimulus and you're like, which is what fibromyalgia is. So there are so many things that we get exposed to on a regular basis that are neurotoxic. So one of them is mold. Then there's mercury. And so many people are like, well, where do I get exposed to mercury? And I'm like, well, anybody who has silver fillings in their mouth has mercury exposure. If you eat fish, you have mercury exposure.